Good afternoon, and welcome to our last session for today. That's panel 4, and it's titled Hidden Hair Stories, Unveiling Forgotten Narratives. It's a panel that explores the hidden narratives of women's involvement in photography and publishing, and their often overlooked contribution to these fields, starting from Italy's early pioneers in photography to the gendered politics of urban spaces in Greece, and the feminist activism in the pages of an Irish magazine. So we'll start with Professor Linda Bertelli and Dr. Agnese Ghezzi, from the MIT School for Advanced Studies in Lucca. Professor Bertelli is an associate professor in aesthetics, and Dr. Ghezzi is a postdoctoral research, and they're going to present and discuss the presence of women in early Italian photography, the first 100 years, actually. Okay, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and thank you also for having us again after the beautiful conference in Zagreb and this beautiful conference too. Actually, I think that one of the marks that a conference is going very well is the fact that at a certain point you want to change completely your paper, integrating all the comments and the ideas that the other gave you. So we are going to present our original paper for the sake of the conference, but with plenty of ideas of change in it. So. In April 1967 article published in the certainly not feminist-inspired Cosmopolitan magazine entitled The Computer Girls, author Lois Mandel describes a moment in history, the United States in the mid-1960s, when career opportunities for women computer programmers were numerous and were encouraged. We are in the early decades of the history of the programming industry if we consider that the first fully electronic programmable digital computer in the United States was completed in November 1945, exactly 2 months after the end of the Second World War. It was then a professional field which, although strongly linked to technological development and innovation, certainly does not yet have the role it has today, especially in terms of economics and prestige, and in areas such as national security and surveillance. In those early decades, it was a field of innovation, certainly, but still marked by the marginalization, this, let's say, niche character that portrays almost every technological innovation in its early days. When the project Fotografiste, Women in Photography from Italian Archives 1839-1939 began to take shape, one of the hypotheses yet to be verified was that this same dynamic in terms of pattern and structure had also occurred in the nascent photographic sector. What one notices very easily, in fact, in the Cosmopolitan piece is a certain rhetoric that, intending not to question mid-century gender cultural assumptions, invents a discursive framework that reads the operation and skills needed to carry out work in computer programming as in continuity with the operation and skills needed for domestic work. It's just like planning a dinner, and I'm quoting the words of Dr. Grace Hopper, the staff scientist in system programming, interviewed by the author of the article. You have to plan ahead, schedule everything so it's ready when you need. Programming requires passion and the ability to handle detail. And these are why, I'm still quoting, women are naturals at computer programming. This type of rhetoric, which has both verbal and visual consistency, is clearly twofold. While on the one hand, it seems to advocate the presence of women labor sector in certain labor sectors, on the other hand, In fact, it marginalizes them through sexist arguments, often resulting in an exclusionary or even expulsionary effects. Identifying this type of rhetoric, verbal and visual, in the sources is nevertheless significant from an historical point of view because clearly, if read between the lines, it nonetheless signals the active presence of unexpected subjects, as was the case for women in the photographic sector in the first decades of the medium's history. The presence of women is thus recovered through that which causes interference in this rhetoric, in a construction of this discourse, both verbal and visual, which has explicitly tended to relegate their actual presence to the margin and anonymity in order to reinforce precise gender expectations. We give just one example of these interferences, which, although not always easy to spot, are conspicuous in number. These that you can see from the slide are 3 plates that appear in an article in a monthly bulletin of the Italian Photographic Society of the year 1907. The article describes a leading Italian photographic plate factory, the Luminosa, based in Genoa. Although there is no mention in the article, it's easy to notice, looking at the pictures, that practically all the workers are women. The report, however, insists on the technical difficulty and competence required to perform complex work in technologically innovative machinery, but neglects to dwell on the gender of the female workers. Someone does highly specialized work, but there are no possible words to say, given the gender expectations at the time high, that that someone is female. This time, it is the images that betray this aspect and that tell us another side of the story. These are the traces, these interferences are exactly the traces we are looking for in our project.
So this research represents the first stage of a 2-year research larger project named, as already mentioned, Fotografiste, Women in Photography from Italian Archives. And that was funded by the Italian Ministry of University and Research under the umbrella of the PRIN and NPRR 2022 call. The aim of the project is to uncover the underanalyzed experience of women active in the photographic sector, looking at the first 100 years of the medium within the Italian context, but today we will limit to a smaller chronology, trying to single out the multifaceted engagement of women within the photographic milieu from the very origin of the medium, ranging from their participation as employees in established enterprises, as we have just seen in the previous slide, to their entrepreneurial ventures and amateur pursuits. While we are going to proceed, as you will see, through the analysis of selected case studies, we aim to step out of the paradigm of authorship linked to an art historical understanding, looking instead at photography as an industry, a business, a social tool, situated within broader networks of media and technologies. To do so, the project does not consider solely photographic objects, but expand the research to less explored sources such as journals, exhibition catalogs, commercial documents, civil registries, browsing in those archives that can provide information on the different forms of making photography, foregrounding the oft-neglected dimension of women's labor's history. So, after the first month of the project, today we are pleased to share some preliminary and unpublished results of the ongoing research, focusing on 2 different case studies that have been scarcely analyzed by the literature so far. These micro cases allows us to shed light on the general structure of the photographic sector and present different forms of participating in it. That of the Marsini sisters, studio owner in the 1860s, and that of Teresa De Giorgis, amateur active within the Italian Photographic Society in the first decades of the 20th century. So, in September 1867, the Esposizione Provinciale di Belle Arti, Arti e Mestieri took place in the Tuscan city of Lucca, between Pisa and Florence, an occasion to display the artistic, artisanal, agricultural, and industrial development of the area in the context of the newly unified Italian country. Among the most honorable mentions, the Commission, composed not surprisingly of solely male members, awarded the Marsini sisters, Sorelle Marsini, for, and I'm translating, several portraits in photography found worthy of special consideration for their sharpness, good and different coloring, and for the artistic light given to the models, which affects the beauty of the photographic images. So if one looks for other more traces about this Marsini sister in the municipality archive, it is possible to gain some knowledge about their life through parish registry and the census of the population, learning about their humble social status and family composition. It's maybe a bit hard to read, but their birth year is 1835 and 1846, and the sisters are Giuseppa and Emilia. And the father, Felice, is here named and as working as confetturiere, candy seller, can be translated, while the mother and the sister are listed as donne di casa, housewife. So this census also has a summary divided by male and female profession, so it's very interesting sources, and we can notice that in 1861 you have the photographer for the male profession on the right, while you don't have a mention of photographer among the female profession on the right of the slide. While if we consider the 1871 census of the population, we can notice not only that the Marsini family has relocated in a nearby street, but also that Giuseppina appears now as the head of the household at the very top, and also that the profession of the two sisters is now stated, and it's photographer over there. So, few photographic sources, a dozen of albumen prints preserved in the Archivio Fotografico Lucchese, can provide some other traces. The carte de visite that you can see can confirm that their prevailing interest was that of portraits, and the stamp on the back provides information on their studio located in Via del Castellaccio, close to the cathedral of the city. In 1870, these documents that reappears in the records of the municipality, it's a request for permission to place a sign with the name of their new business, Stabilimento Fotografico Sorelle Marsini, that you can find on the left, located in the same street of their new house. That changes is also visible in other sets of carte de visite, which carries a different stamp on the verso, as you can see, which includes information about their new activity with the new name, as well as about their award in the exhibition. You can see Premiate in the 1867 exhibition. So the impression is that the company has grown and become more prominent after this public recognition. And further information about the Marsini sisters, confirmed by both photographic and written sources, allow us to relocate their activity in another city, still in Tuscany, in Livorno, in a central square, from 1873 onwards, while in 1884, in the commercial section of the State Archives, there are information about a new studio business to be opened in Florence, in Via Nazionale, that is the same street of a well-known Alinari studio, which you have certainly heard of. And this time the venture was in collaboration between the Marsini sisters and two brothers named Borgiotti, who acted as business partners, while the Marsini were the capitalist partners, so the one who actually invests the money to open the activity. So while these details provide further insight into the sister entrepreneurship, the fact that the firm would in the end be named after the Fratelli Borgiotti, the brothers, make us wonder about how many female presences are often embedded within male business titles and acronyms.
So we are going to talk about the second, very briefly, the second case study. Thank you. The second case study, and we have to say that information on Teresa De Giorgis, an amateur photographer whose surname is sometimes also spelled De Giorgis, which is another problem, of course, as you know, the different way the name are spelled in the archive without, so De Giorgis without a space. The information that we have is still very, very scarce. She certainly belongs to about 2 generations later than Marzinis, since we know that at least since 907 she was an official member of the Italian Photographic Society, founded in Florence, as many of you already know, in May 1889. And if at the origin of the movement in the Italian photographic community that had led to the foundation actually of this society was above all the commitment to the valorization and protection of professions in the photographic sector, the statute that the society later decided to give itself provided for a broad opening to the world of amateur photography as well. Even though at the time of its founding, the society had only 1 woman member, the Baroness Georgina French, this openness to photographic culture rather than the profession was one of the incentives, albeit very tenuous, let's say, that allowed women to join and actively participate in the life of the society. They acted, for example, as members of juries for photographic competitions, which was a phenomenon that was certainly, along with others, a transformative channel for the visibility of women, even non-professionals, in the sector. We have a slide with this is, for example, the report of a jury for the evaluation of some photographic works requested to the society, a jury of which Teresa De Giorgis was a member in 1908. From the end of 1889, the Society began to publish the already mentioned monthly bulletin, which is together with other specialized journals in the sector, such as La Camera Oscura and Progresso Fotografico, one of the primary sources for tracking these traces of women who worked in various and multifarious capacities in the photographic sector in these early decades. Through these traces, we are not always able actually to produce a consistent story. And this is certainly never the case actually if we limit ourselves to a single source such as, in this case, the Bulletin of the Italian Photographic Society, to find out who the amateur photographer Teresa De Giorgis was. In any case, we have found that Teresa was known quite well in those years, well enough at least to be awarded a bronze medal at the International Exhibition of Photography in Dresden in 1909, even though, to be frank, the jury's evaluation was not so commendable. Subjects of little general interest, accuracy in printing, carefulness in framing. However, we do not know where or when Teresa was born. Due to the presence of a De Giorgis family active in the photographic industry in these same years in the northern Italian regions of Piedmont and later Lombardy, we have a hypothesis that Teresa might have been related to this family. But unfortunately, we have not so far found any evidence in this direction, except that in 1910, 2 pictures of her in a so-called ethnographic style entitled Piedmontese types were published in the bulletin. We cannot dwell, unfortunately, on the term type, famous term type. We know how dominant it was in the late 19th and early 20th century anthropologists, just as we know that a proposal that was never fully realized, actually to conduct a photographic survey dedicated to the representation of Italian costumes circulating within the society from 1898. But unfortunately, this clue that is derived from the subject of the images cannot be considered conclusive, because 3 years earlier, in 1907, when the Georges actually first appeared in the pages of the bulletin with this image that you can see on the left of the slide, in the passage describing the photograph, she is referred to as a member from Florence, so a different place in Italy. Moreover, also in a subsequent issues of the bulletin, her presence is still located in another Tuscan city, that of Lucca, as evident from both the obituary of Giuseppe Pizzighelli, the president of the society who died in 1912, and 2 years later, in 1914, from these images that you can see from the slide, which the journal entitles Profiles Peasants from Lucca.
So, to conclude, already from those two cases of Marsini and the Georges, it is possible to understand the vitality of women's participation in photography between the 19th and the 20th century, showing how women carve a space for themselves through the medium as a possible social, working, technical, and artistic tool. The archival material and research repositioning proposed here moves beyond normative institutional histories, inasmuch it overturns what has been for long considered at the center and forefront of photography, namely the visual content, the author, to the periphery and the background, the material making, the business history, the professional and amateurs circles, and the involvement in the photographic production and circulation. So especially in a sector like photography that, as we all know and are discussing in those days, is canonized through male protagonists and pioneers, the dominant narrative has often proposed women experience as either invisible, impossible to recover in the fabric of history, or presented the few females that emerged as exceptional expressions of unusual skills. The presentation instead sought to show how such stories are instead present, but have been marginalized, rendered invisible, and can be mended through a critical and feminist approach to archival materials. Thank you.